The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents Trust the Experts. Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I'm having a really good time here. I've got a lot of work done, but there's a lot more to do, and some of it has had to be postponed. I'm supposed to be doing a collab with Pelagia at some point, or Pelagia if you want. I'm never quite sure exactly how to pronounce it. It's kind of weird. But anyway, it'll be coming probably next month because I had to get ready for a convention, and I saw on his Twitter he had posted a meme in order to call out a problem with it. And when I saw it, I realized, oh my gosh, I should do this. Originally, I thought maybe as a TikTok video. And then I realized there's too much wrong here to do it as a TikTok video. So the meme, which I'll read first and then just leave it up, it says, I trust the experts. Yeah, which ones? The ones willing to get fired or the ones profiting? When given two people with the same education, experience, and expertise, always trust the expert who is willing to sacrifice their job for what they are saying over the one who will say anything to keep theirs. Trust the right experts. Motivation matters, people. Now, there's so much wrong here, I'm just going to leave it up because there's almost not a single line of this that doesn't have like almost gross conceptual errors. When I was in the Naval Nuclear Training Program, GCE was gross conceptual error. That was I've talked about this before. If you got a question wrong and you were just completely wrong, like it was obvious you didn't have a fundamental grasp of even the basics behind the question, instead of marking it wrong, they would just put GCE on there. That's what happens quite a lot when we're dealing with apologists and when we're dealing with people who are not particularly rational or well-versed in logical arguments. So what it says here is which ones, the ones willing to get fired or the ones profiting? Now, I want to point out that early on, when it came, my YouTube channel, for example, is still not monetized. You can contribute to Patreon is what I do. It will be monetized at some point. But I used to think that if somebody monetized their channel, it impacted their credibility. That's nonsense. And it comes from growing up in an era where when like a musician would sell their song to Taco Bell or whatever, that was them selling out and they were no longer credible as a musician. And I realized later on, that's simply false. The music's either good or it's not good, or you like it or you don't like it, independent of whether or not, they sold it to every commercial thing under the sun or what their reasons were. When this says, are you going to trust the ones willing to get fired or the ones profiting? First of all, whether or not somebody's profiting is irrelevant. They could be profiting and correct. They could be profiting and incorrect. And similarly, whether or not they're willing to get fired is irrelevant. But when you read this, it says, given two people with the same education, experience, and expertise. Well, first of all, no two such people exist. There may be two people with similar and nearly identical education, but maybe similar and nearly identical experience. But the expertise is unlikely to be similar. It's just wrong to think that you're going to find anybody or ever be in a situation where the credentials of two different individuals are going to be so identical that then you can look to see which one of them is profiting versus which one of them is willing to get fired. I wouldn't nitpick this point if it weren't for the fact that virtually every line of this tiny little meme is wrong in multiple ways. I would have skipped right past this and said, listening charitably or reading charitably, it's saying all other things being equal, you shouldn't have confidence in someone who's profiting off of it. It is almost an intuitive stance. We frequently want to dismiss anyone who's profiting off of it. So, the drug companies just are making money, so you can't trust them at all. It's nonsense. But when it continues after the experience and expertise, and it says, always trust the expert. Well, first of all, the phrase always trust is a phrase that shouldn't really be uttered. You shouldn't always trust any person over any other person based on criteria. This notion of always trust. I'm a big fan of David Hume. And when he talks about given a miraculous claim, I have to ask myself whether it's more likely that the person be deceived or deceiving then that what they said is true, and I reject the greater miracle. Hume's epistemology is this reject the greater miracle. It's not accept the lesser miracle. And this meme is essentially saying, given two people, one of whom is profiting and one of whom is not, it doesn't say always distrust the one that's profiting. It says always trust the expert who's willing to sacrifice their job. You shouldn't always trust any expert. There's not a criteria, apart from knowing who's right, that you should trust. But even then, it's not trusting the expert. And so the always trust part of that sentence is wrong. Then the expert part of that sentence is wrong because, nope, we're talking about a person here. And trust isn't in the person, but in the claim supported by the evidence. It's the data that we're trusting, not the person. This meme is putting everything at the feet of a person. It continues with, who is willing to sacrifice their job? Well, no, there are some zealots with outlandish views that are willing to get fired, in part because it seemingly gives them credibility with people like the author of this meme. Once you learn that people are like, oh, I'm more likely to trust you once you're willing to get fired, then you are more willing to be fired for your ridiculous, outlandish beliefs. I heard years ago of a geology PhD student who was a young Earth creationist and did not believe anything at all about the dating mechanisms, the radiometric dating mechanisms that he had to learn as a geology student. He studied for and got his PhD specifically so that he could go join the Discovery Institute and say, hey, I've got a PhD in geology and I know more about this dating and I'm a recognized expert. And I think the Earth is young. A degree shows that you did the work. It shows that you showed up and you probably did the work. That's it. What you retain, what you understand, what you can demonstrate, and how accurate your results are is completely separate from whether or not you got a degree, whether or not you were willing to put in the effort for the work, whether or not you're willing to sacrifice your job. That's it. But it continues to say you should trust them over the one who will say anything to keep theirs. But that also means that that person who's willing to say anything to keep theirs isn't trustworthy. Yes, someone who will say anything to keep their job isn't trustworthy. But how do you know that they're willing to say anything to keep their job? This is one of the most dishonest aspects of this meme, and I missed it the first 2 or 3 times I read it when I was writing down everything that was wrong. As a matter of fact, it's not even fully formed in my notes. Oh, always trust them over the person who's willing to say anything to keep theirs. That's a character assassination, because let's say you have 2 people and one of them is willing to lose their job and the other one is telling you what they think. You're just assuming that they're willing to say anything to keep theirs, or that, that they're not willing to risk their job. Maybe they're just as willing to risk their job for the truth. It's just that they have the truth and nobody's going to be risking their job over it because it's the consensus view. It's not the experts we should trust. It's the data. Don't trust the experts, trust the data. The experts are the ones demonstrating an expertise in a field, and the test of their expertise isn't whether or not they profit. It isn't whether or not they want to keep their job. It isn't whether or not they're willing to lose their job. The demonstration is in the data. When it comes to science, we have systems in place to show who has an expertise. And it's not merely a matter of education or experience. It's about whose views are recognizably consistent with the best understanding of the data. Those systems, that demonstration of expertise, what is it? Well, peer review, which, while imperfect, is a huge part of it, as is consensus, as is citation. And neither, or none of the 3 of these, is necessarily correct, or neither of them means that a particular position is necessarily correct. Just that if there's a strong consensus, citations, and peer review, we know that it's less likely to be wrong. We know that it represents the best findings. And that's important because science doesn't make proclamations of truth. Scientists shouldn't be coming out saying X is true. What science does is produce tentative models that are the best, most reliable descriptions of reality. And you should proportion your confidence appropriately and proportionally. Now, this meme came out in part in questions around vaccines and reliability of supposed experimental vaccines, et cetera. And specifically, while pointing out folks who were willing to risk their job to spread their zealous ideas over the consensus science. So by all means, trust the data and the consensus interpretation of that data, and only trust it to a level proportional to the evidence that supports it. And you should also only trust it proportional to your understanding of it. We can't all be experts. We can't all know and understand everything about everything. And so you're going to, in your life, have to have confidence in the information provided to you by experts. You obviously should not be accepting anything that is so far beyond your comprehension. What you should accept is that while you don't understand it, the people who do seem to know, and we'll go with what they say until you have some way to shut it down, some way to show that it's wrong. But this meme of, those who are willing to sacrifice their job are almost certainly more correct than those who will say anything, when you haven't demonstrated, A, that the one person is willing to say just anything to keep their job, and you're still talking about it in terms of a person. This notion that we get our information from a person and you just have to trust a person is one of the primary things that shows a difference between religions and science. Look at religious experts. They don't ever demonstrate an expertise in the facts of the subject, but in the meta discussion about the subject. They can tell you about what Christian doctrine is or what the Bible says, but they have no expertise in a God. They have no expertise in the supernatural. They just have an expertise in what people have said about a God and what people have said about the supernatural, which means that the priests and preachers, their expertise is in the fan fiction, not in the actual subject. And it's in those individuals that people put their trust. Put your trust in your preacher. He's putting his trust in God that he can't demonstrate exists. When it comes to the science, we don't put our trust in people. We put our trust in the process. We put our trust in the data. We put our trust in the process that looks at the data and says, here is a model that represents the consensus view of the people with the greatest expertise, assessing this and saying this represents our best understanding, not the truth, but our best understanding. This meme is broken at almost every possible turn. Motivation does matter. If we were to apply this meme to this meme, we would reject this meme, which I'm going to do, but not because I'm applying this meme to it. In any case, that's what I got for this one. Thank you so much. And be careful that when you're reading memes on the internet, some of the ones that may feel intuitively accurate are playing on your intuitions and playing on your reliance on common sense in order to override your actual critical thinking skills. See you next time.